welcome Stephanie. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it is really a pleasure. As mentioned at the top, you joined Cloudflare recently, in April of last year, after 25 years at Goldman Sachs. At Goldman Sachs, Stephanie had a very distinguished career. She rose to become a member of the management committee, and she led its push into consumer banking as it tried to diversify its traditional business. And now at Cloudflare, you're taking on this newly created role of Chief Strategy Officer alongside Matthew Prince, of course. And I saw the description is that you're leading the company's efforts to expand the breadth and the depth of its presence in the boardroom and the C-suite. Sounds very ambitious.
It's very fun.
Okay, great. Well, we have a lot to cover. You guys made quite a bit of news. I know one that has news that's had repercussions throughout the industry. Really, we want to talk about that. But why don't we start at the beginning? We got a little bit of an intro of what Cloudflare does, but give us an overview. What is the company? What's the position?
So Cloudflare is a leading internet infrastructure provider. We work with millions of customers, and we help them build and run their applications so that they're fast and secure. So we're highly distributed. We have more than 330, we're in more than 330 cities and more than 125 countries. And we use that really large network to run things fastly, securely, reliably, but on top of that, to help people build applications, particularly in the age of AI.
Okay, thank you for that. Obviously very important in protecting against cybersecurity attacks and helping sites have their security. Now, just last week you announced what you called Content Independence Day. And the idea is that Cloudflare, by default, is going to block scrapers from coming onto websites. Tell us what that's all about.
Right. So on July 1st, we made an announcement that we flipped the Cloudflare system to be permission-based, with the idea that we could create the conditions so a market could develop. And what that means is that for all new domains on the Cloudflare network, the default will be set to block AI crawling, either at the network layer or using robots. It will be in the sign-up flow. It's easy for you to make a decision whether you want to leave it that way or you want to change it. On top of that, we added the ability on a granular basis to decide what to do across many different AI bots, whether that's training or search. And we launched a beta so that you could ask to be paid per crawl, with the idea being that content creators should get to decide whether or not they want to block, allow, or charge for crawling on their site.
Obviously, this has huge repercussions for AI, for the LLMs that are being built, and I want to talk about pay-per-crawl in particular, but let's start with the content creators. What is happening with them that led to this kind of decision?
Yeah, I think let's talk about this conference. We can talk about your role in life, but if you walk around this conference, you'll see lots of people with a tag that says they're from a media organization, they're from a research organization. They spend a lot of time coming up with a unique perspective on everything that was done here at the Raise conference. And what's going on is that lots of people today, instead of reading that original content, they're reading a derivative of that content. Well, we've got to figure out a way to have an incentive for all of those content creators to continue to do what they do. Today, they make money through ads, subscriptions. They also get the personal satisfaction of knowing that someone actually read their content and commented on it. And in the age of AI, where you're reading the derivative, you're not doing that anymore. And so the idea is we put content creators in control of deciding whether or not they want AI to be scraping and ultimately summarizing their content. And many of them have already done deals with large AI companies, and Cloudflare's role in that is to defend those deals. Because if you're an AI company and you're paying someone for content, you certainly don't want someone else getting that for free. So we view our role as sitting in the middle of this ecosystem. It's about bringing content creator and AI companies together.
It sounds like you're giving a bit more leverage to the content creators. You're giving them this option to be able to negotiate from maybe not a position of strength, but not a position of weakness, which has been the case, I think, in some cases.
We're creating the conditions where a market can develop, and that's a market that includes really big AI companies and really big publishers, who, by the way, that market is met in a bunch of places in terms of them already doing deals. But there's a very long tail of content creators and AI companies. And if you go back to the description of Cloudflare, millions of customers sit on the Cloudflare network. Some of those are the world's largest companies. Some of those are individual bloggers. And some of the beauty of the internet is the diversity, the reach of the internet. And doing this not only is about the largest companies, but it's also about that long tail on both sides.
Matthew, I think it was in the blog post when he announced this, he described the decline in Google search and how essentially it's a broken relationship, a break in the 30-year relationship between content creators and some of the technology companies. And there were some nice stats that Cloudflare produced talking about how much more difficult it is now to get people to your site to be able to either read those stories for the satisfaction of it or for the paid advertiser and the subscriptions. I think he said that on Google it's now 10 times more difficult, but when it comes to the AI companies, it's much more difficult to be able to get people there. Could you talk a bit about?
Yeah, I think all of these companies are very different, right? They've been around different periods of time. They have different types of models. They have different business models. And so that will impact any of the stats that you can find on Radar, which is on Cloudflare's site. And so some of them are crawling for training, some of them are crawling for search, some of them are crawling for both, and then some of them have a more search-based business model, some of them have more B2B business models, and so all of those things will get put together that will determine how often someone crawls your site and then how much they refer traffic. Now, the interesting thing is there's a lot of questions about, are people still crawling for training? And one of the beauties of Cloudflare, which is more than 20% of the internet sits behind Cloudflare, we basically see the whole internet. Traffic from AI training crawlers has gone up 65% in the last 6 months. So no, training has not stopped happening on the internet. There's a significant amount of training happen on the internet, in addition to all the other types of crawling and bot traffic, but it's overwhelmed by AI training still today.
I was surprised as I read through the stats that you guys produced. I was surprised at the differences in the different AI models. You talked about, I think Anthropic was at one end, where the amount of crawling they were doing was 48,000 times as much as the amount of traffic that they were referring. So they're very good at kind of keeping people on their own platform. At the other end was Mistral, actually, which should be kind of interesting, I think, to this audience. Could you talk about why there's that difference and what is leading into some of those?
Yeah, I mean, again, we're at the very beginning of how to think about this, and I think you have to think about the numerator and you have to think about the denominator, right? So there's how much crawling are you doing? And so one of the things that Cloudflare is actually, we think we can do over time is make crawling significantly more efficient. There's lots of crawling that's happening on the internet where they're crawling the same thing over and over and over again. And because the amount of traffic that Cloudflare sees, we can easily tell whether or not something's new, has it been refreshed, we can give quality signals. So there's a bunch of ways to make those stats better. You can just crawl less because you can be more efficient about how you crawl. You can maybe crawl less for training because you're not doing that and you're instead crawling for search. And then there is, what is your business model? Do you have a more consumer-based business model where someone's coming to your site to ask questions about shopping or things where it's obvious that they would then link out to whether it's a restaurant or a news publication, or is it more of a B2B model where they're likely to just get the summary of the information? So there's so many things wrapped up in what determines what those statistics are. Again, we're at the very early stages, and I think part of our role in this is to help make this all more efficient. It's to help bring together the two ecosystems so we can have a sustainable business model.
Okay. Do you have insights into why Mistral is such an outlier?
No.
Okay, all right. I think that would be interesting. Talk a bit more, if you could, about pay per crawl. What's that? It sounds like that's pointed in the direction of trying to reach some common ground and being able to figure out how the companies on one side and the content creators on the other will meet someplace. How does it work?
There's a little known feature of the internet called the 402 response, which hasn't gotten a bunch of use. But the way to think about pay per crawl is if you're a content creator, you can set the price and say, I will block unless you pay X. Or on the flip side, a model can say, I want to crawl your site, and the maximum I'm willing to pay is Y. And those two parties will come to an agreement through messaging around what that price should be. And then they will either crawl or they'll be blocked. Now, this is simplistic, the beginning. This is the very beginning of trying to figure out a business model that's going to work. By the way, we will take any and all ideas. There are so many different parts of this ecosystem. There's the payment side of the ecosystem. There's how you actually determine the price. There's how that goes back and forth. What's the right business model for different types of models? How do you think about the long tail of our content? How do you think about exclusivity? Like, there are so many different ways to think about this, but our view was that we had to start somewhere. We wanted to put something out there so that everyone could comment on it, and we expected that we were going to get feedback on it, and that's why it's in beta. That's why it's not available broadly, because we're just the beginning of figuring out what this is going to look like.
I want to read a section of what Matthew wrote, just because I thought it was kind of an incredible quote. He said, "We believe that if we can begin to score and value content, not on how much traffic it generates, but on how much it furthers knowledge, we will not only help AI engines get better faster, but also potentially facilitate a new golden age of high-value content creation." Now, I thought I was idealistic, but is that, so why is Cloudflare?
Yeah, we thrive on innovation and optimism at Cloudflare. No, it's actually a really, really important point about what we're trying to do, and it's why we didn't say this is the business model and we're going with it, and why we're experimenting. The idea is to get quality content to thrive on the internet. And so we don't know exactly how that's going to work or how to do that, but you can imagine in a world where we can tell a model how high quality the content is, what source it's from, how new it is. It's not scanning the same thing 100 times. It finds the source for facts and scans that once. And so this idea that there's a real incentive to create new, different, interesting, creative ideas, we think that there is a real optimistic view that that's what's going to flourish in the age of AI.
Okay. So on this stage yesterday, the CEO of Bright Data had some pretty sharp words for your initiative. He talked about how you can't stop technology. That was part of it. He also said that nothing's really changed, that crawling essentially still works. And he said Cloudflare shouldn't act like a bully. Would you like to respond?
My recollection of what he said was that something did have to change, that we had to come up with a business model that works, and I think all of us are trying to work together to figure out what that looks like. I think what we're doing is very simple. Our view is that the world should be permission-based. You should know who's on your site. They should verify that they are who they say they are. They should tell you what they want to do on your site, and then you have the decision to make whether or not you want to block them, you want to allow them, or you want to charge them. There is no company I've seen that's more innovative than Cloudflare. And so we're highly focused, not just on this initiative, but on the AI ecosystem more broadly. We have a very large developer platform. Humbly, it's one of the best places in the world to build AI agents. We believe in the AI ecosystem, but AI needs original content too. If the internet dies and original content dies, it's going to be very difficult for AI models to continue to develop and thrive. And so this is about building that ecosystem. And our intent was not to break the internet on July 1st. The intent was to make it permission-based and to put creators and other website owners in control and to create the conditions so that a business model can develop on the other side.
Okay. And when you talk about the business model on the other side and reaching some kind of common ground, paper crawl is one idea. Do you have a sense yet what the other options are? What is likely to develop from this tension?
I think there are a lot of different models that can develop, and so I think the world is best discussed in analogy. So I think there's a lot of discussion around the ad-based system, and so we know what that worlds look like. Another view is that we've gone from the Napster world to more of the Spotify world, and so there's a business model that's developed around music that relates to that. And so I think there are many different industries that you can look at that have developed business models that figure out a way to not only make innovation thrive, but ensure that content creators can have an incentive to keep doing what they do well.
Okay. I think we're going to run out of time before I get through all my questions, but I do want to ask you about the 25 years that you spent in finance in particular. Talk to us a little bit about, now you've got such a taste of technology and AI. When you look at the world of finance from your many years at Goldman Sachs, you worked in investment banking, of course, you know about trading, consumer banking, corporate banking. Where do you see AI taking off the most? Where do you think there's the most potential?
I think AI is very interesting in financial services. One, there's so much data in financial services. So it's a data-rich industry. It's an industry that thrives on data. And so I think there are countless ways where AI can be used reliably. I've spoken to a lot of people at this conference, and one of the biggest issues for AI is whether or not you have clean, good data. And one of the great things about financial services is that you tend to have a lot of data. The other side of that is that a lot of financial services tends to be highly regulated. And so that slows down the pace of innovation in many cases. And so I think you're looking for places in financial services where they're data rich and there's less regulation. One of the promises of something like AI is that it will lower the cost to serve, and that generally is an equalizer in financial services, which means that you can provide products to more people. I think fintech is a very perfect example of this. It tends to be a less regulated area of financial services. It tends to already be digital native, and so I think there are many areas where you're going to see AI thrive to actually bring services that were only available to maybe a small number of companies or to a small number of individuals to more of the mass market. So I'm excited about what's going to happen with AI and financial services.
Just because this is a hot topic these days, do you think it's also going to take jobs in a place like Goldman Sachs? Let's say the investment banking sector broadly.
One of the most important things that you learn in a place like investment banking is that it's about the relationships. And those are about human relationships. If you think about what happens in investment banking, it's generally one of the most important transactions that a company will ever do. And so yes, the models matter and the analytics matter, but the underlying relationship really matters. And by the way, I think that's true not just in financial services. I think there's a lot of things that AI will do that will just make the jobs better. I was an analyst in investment banking. I would be very happy for AI to do a bunch of the things that I did as an analyst. I mean, there's many things that I did as an analyst that don't happen today because computers and machine learning and other things were able to do it, and that just made the analyst job better.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about your new role, Chief Strategy Officer. How do you see Cloudflare's business evolving in the next few years?
Yeah, I think one of the amazing things about being at Cloudflare is how fast we innovate, how broad the Cloudflare platform is. The underlying competitive advantage of Cloudflare sits in our network in those more than 330 cities and more than 125 countries. And so there is so much opportunity we have both in cybersecurity, because unlike many others who put their platform on a PowerPoint slide, we have a platform. Every server is capable of running exactly the same software everywhere around the world. So as people start to really consolidate who they're using around things like cybersecurity, I think there's enormous opportunity. And then the promise of the Cloudflare developer platform, which was really built for AI because it's so distributed. It's serverless by design, and so that has latency advantages, that has security advantages, that has cost advantages, and so the future of Cloudflare is very exciting, in addition to the initiative that we announced just earlier this month.
Okay, we were running short, but I want to ask you one question about your career. Who were your mentors, and what career advice did you get that you found most valuable early on?
Yeah, the things I learned from so many people. I spent 25 years at Goldman Sachs. I walked in straight out of undergraduate. I walked out a member of the management committee and a partner, so I can't name the number of people that mentored me both inside of Goldman Sachs and outside. But the thing that was most important, which by the way translates perfectly to Cloudflare, was this focus on empathy. So really understanding how other people were feeling and thinking, this idea of being mission-oriented, and then this idea of just getting stuff done, being execution-oriented. There's a lot of time spent on analysis and all these other things, but at some point, you just have to go.
Ladies and gentlemen, Stephanie Cohen, thank you very much for the time.
Thank you.